Coming up on Talking Points, New York Attorney General Letitia James is suing former President Donald Trump and his 3 children. This comes after her years-long civil investigation to the Trump Organization's business practices. We'll break down what James is suing Trump for in just a few minutes.
And in Iran, protests have erupted across the country after an Iranian woman was killed in police custody last week. We have the latest details on the investigation and the demonstration around the country.
Plus, the New York gubernatorial race is heating up. We'll break down the latest polls on the race between Governor Kathy Hochul and Congressman Lee Zeldin. Talking Points starts right now. Welcome into this edition of Talking Points, and hey, happy Rosh Hashanah to all those who celebrate. I'm Chilekasi, Adele.
And I'm Tegan Brown. We have a lot of international news and coverage to break down this evening, but first, let's start with the latest news and headlines.
Giorgia Meloni, the leader of the Brothers of Italy party, has claimed victory in Italy's general election. According to the Italian Interior Ministry, Meloni won at least 44% of the votes. Meloni is now slated to become the first female prime minister in the country's history. She will be leading the most far-right Italian government since Benito Mussolini's reign in the 1940s.
And also in Europe, Germany, the continent's largest economy, faces a recession. Germany's business confidence index has reached its lowest mark in over a decade. Economists in Germany are saying high energy prices and pressure on profit margins are to blame. Economists also say recession isn't unique to Germany and that Europeans should expect similar issues throughout the continent.
And in Latin America, Cuba has voted to legalize same-sex marriage and adoption for the first time in the nation's history. The Cuban government has ratified the referendum that had more than 4 million votes in favor of the change.
The reform was met with unusually strong opposition from the country's evangelical movement. However, Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel said in a tweet earlier today that, quote, justice has been done. He also stated that, quote, starting today, Cuba will be a better nation, end quote.
Hurricane Ian is heading towards the United States. It is projected to be a Category 3 or 4 storm if it makes landfall off the coast of Florida and its panhandle. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has already declared a state of emergency for the entire state. So, Tegan, looks like the whole of Florida is supposed to be seeing this hurricane coming through. Right now, it's at a Cat 2, going on Cat 3, and it's expected to rise to the Sunshine State within the next couple days. Exactly,
and it's supposed to be a Category 4 by the time it reaches Florida. Theoretically, by late tomorrow, it's supposed to hit Cuba tonight, as we were saying. And, you know, Ron DeSantis has said that this is going to have a huge impact and that it will have repercussions. He didn't really clarify on what those repercussions will be, but obviously there's going to be a lot of damage, and National Guard has already been sent to Florida.
Yeah, and you know, Florida, a state that has a decent amount of agriculture too, also a lot of hospitals, people coming from all over the state to big cities like Tampa and Miami to come get health care. So obviously there's going to be a lot of sectors affected by this, but one thing I think is also important is that there's a gubernatorial election. Ron DeSantis going for election in November against Charlie Crist, and we saw, at least in the immediate aftermath of that winter storm in Texas, how that was hurt Greg Abbott's polling numbers and some other politicians like Ted Cruz and whatnot as well. So I think that's something to watch.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens and develops. Now, moving on to the state of New York, Attorney General Letitia James filed a fraud lawsuit against former President Donald Trump late last week. Talking Points analyst Anna Salewycz is here to break down the latest details and potential implications of this civil lawsuit. So, Anna, thank you so much for joining us here. Now, to start out, you know, what exactly is James suing Trump for in the first place?
Yep, so James accused Trump, his 3 children, Donald Jr., Eric, and Ivanka, and their family business of lying to lenders and insurers by overvaluing their assets by billions of dollars. Now, the lawsuit, it kind of breaks down his annual financial statements. And in those, you see that he widely inflated the values of nearly every one of his marquee properties. So, you know, Mar-A-Lago is included in that, 40 Wall Street, and so is the Trump Tower. Now, James, she's kind of claiming that these fraudulent financial statements that they did obtain, they helped the Trump organization obtain lower interest rates and premiums.
How is the former president and his kids, how are they responding to this lawsuit?
Yep, so Trump actually recently responded multiple times on his Truth Social platform. He called James racist, grossly incompetent, and the worst crime fighter in the company. The Trump organization also came out with a statement. They argue that James put her own political, or quote, put her own political ambitions ahead of the safety of New Yorkers.
So what are we expecting to hear from both sides of this argument?
Yep, so if James wins, the Trumps would ultimately never be able to own a New York business ever again. She also wants a judge to appoint an independent monitor to kind of just oversee the company's financial decisions. She also just wants to stop the Trumps from running the Trump organization and prevent them from acquiring any real estate in New York in the next 5 years. And if Trump wins, you know, he and his family will just continue to run their organization.
It'll be interesting to watch as we head on towards 2024 as well. Anna Salewycz, thank you. Earlier this week, a 3-judge appeals court panel blocked former President Trump from viewing classified documents found in the Mar-A-Lago estate. The files were seized during an FBI raid on August 8th. Talking Points analyst Jake Morel is here to tell us more. Jake?
Chilekasi and Tegan, good evening. The Mar-A-Lago case involving the mishandling of government documents is moving right along, much to former President Trump's dismay. The National Security Risk Review of the documents found at Trump's home this August has continued. This comes after a 3-judge appeals court granted the Justice Department's request to block aspects of U.S. District Court Judge Aileen Cannon's ruling that originally delayed a criminal investigation by questioning the classification of the documents. The panel, which consists of 2 judges appointed by Trump and 1 appointed by former President Barack Obama, released this decision in a 29-page statement. Part of that statement said, "For our part, we cannot discern why plaintiff would have an individual interest or in need of any of the 100 documents with classification markings." So now the DOJ is able to investigate the classified documents at the Mar-A-Lago estate and determine whether there is any reason that Trump should have legally had them. Now, this is another update in a case that's been open for almost 2 months now, so let's take a look at what happened so far. On August 8th, the FBI made a raid at Trump's estate in Mar-A-Lago and took 33 items containing 11,000 documents, which exactly 100 of them were being ruled classified. And on August 22nd, Trump filed a lawsuit to be granted a special master to look over these documents. Now, on September 5th, Judge Cannon approved of Trump's request and also ordered the government to stop their review of the recovered documents until the special master was done with them. Now, skip ahead to last week, and that order was blocked, allowing the investigation to resume.
So, Jake, where does this go from here?
So right now, the first thing that we'll see is Trump has been ordered by the special master to produce evidence that the FBI doctored some of the documents that they found, some of the things that they found at his house before the end of the month. So if he wants to use that in court, if he wants to use that against the FBI, he has to produce that by the end of the month. He made claims that the FBI doctored some of the evidence earlier this month, but the special master report on the documents isn't actually due until November 30th. So we're seeing it move along a little bit, in which we'll have to see if Trump can actually produce evidence, but it's going to be a while until we see that actual special master report come out.
So Jake, all of this is going on right now, but midterms are coming up, and usually around or just after midterms is when people announce their presidential runs. So do you think that'll affect Trump at all?
So I'm not sure if it'll affect Trump's decision to run. I mean, we saw Trump run in 2020 after 2 separate impeachment trials. So it may not affect his decision, but this case could keep Trump off of the ticket. Possession of classified legal documents classified legal government documents is prison time and is a big fine. So he could not be able to run. But also, this case probably won't be over by the time that the midterms are through. It probably won't be over until at least 2023. So we'll just have to see how this affects his decision and how it affects the Republican Party as a whole.
And we'll continue watching this one for sure. Talking Points analyst Jake Morel, thanks. Coming up on Talking Points tonight, hundreds of Iranian citizens have taken to the streets of the country to protest the death of a young woman in police custody. We have the details next on Talking Points. Stick with us.
I see you mobbing over her. Let's go. Let's mob. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, we mobbing. Come on, girl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, let's crawl.
Welcome back to Talking Points. Hundreds of Iranian citizens have flooded the streets in Iran over the death of a young woman in police custody. Talking Points analyst Ericka Love joins us with the details behind one of the biggest demonstrations in Iranian history.
Demonstrations in 15 cities across Iran have broken out after the death of a young woman in police custody. Mahsa Amini, a Kurdish woman from northeastern Iran, was arrested by Iranian police for not complying with the laws regarding public wearing of hijabs or headscarves. She later died from what the Iranian police are claiming was a cardiac seizure. Her death caused an eruption of protest in the streets of Tehran and Kurdistan, where women have been going viral for cutting their hair and burning their hijabs to demonstrate free will and liberty that they feel the Iranian government is taking from them. In the past, several incidents have occurred in Iran where women have been beaten in police custody for similar reasons. However, Iran's president, Ibrahim Raisi, says that the protests are unwarranted and will be dealt with accordingly. Last Thursday, the government shut down access to the internet to prevent the spread of viral videos of the protests across Iran. The Iranian Ministry of Intelligence sent a text message to all cell phone users saying that anyone participating in demonstrations will be punished according to Sharia law. The U.S. Treasury responded by stating that the morality police were responsible for Amini's death and that they have announced sanctions for abuse and violence against Iranian women and the violation of rights of peaceful Iranian protesters. An estimated 40 people have been killed during clashes with security forces in the streets of Iran, and many officials are saying that Iran has not seen such a large demonstration like this since the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Tegan and Chile, back to you.
Ericka Love, thank you. In Russia, over 2,000 citizens have been arrested across 38 different towns. This comes as Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a partial mobilization of Russian citizens to fight in the war in Ukraine. This month, Ukraine's military offensive has pushed back against the Russian military. Here to break down how Russian citizens are reacting to Putin's recent decisions is Talking Points analyst Dominic Chapone. Dominic, thanks for joining us. How many people are protesting in Russia, and what is happening on the ground there?
So last week, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a partial mobilization of Russian citizens to go fight in Ukraine. This is a big shift relative to just having the military. The implications for this are pretty clear. Last Wednesday, once the announcement was made, 1,300 people were confirmed confirmed arrested on Wednesday alone. An additional 745 people were arrested on Saturday. As of now, that's the only update we have in terms of the numbers. But the big thing is that Russian police have detained protesters in almost 40 different cities and precincts across Russia, and the flights for people trying to leave Russia have skyrocketed. So we're seeing the impact is that we could clearly see this is proving the point that Russian citizens are not really in favor of this war, at least a majority of them. But also, Russia is just absolutely desperate to continue this conflict no matter the cost.
And Dominic, we're talking about these Russian citizens and their perspectives, but let's talk about the other nations. How are they reacting to Russia saying, specifically Putin, that they're going to send Russian citizens into Ukraine, and even mentioning the use of nuclear power?
President Putin made a series of comments, everything from we're going to continue this conflict to we will use nuclear power. Now, a lot of the Western nations have already come out and have been totally against this, but they've been focusing on a broad approach. The United States, on the other hand, they've come out strong, and a big criticism of the United States, especially under the Biden administration, is a lot of broad terminology. But starting off with the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, he gave a powerful testimony at the United Nations General Assembly, and this is what he had to say.
I had a window into that horror myself when I traveled to Irpin just a few weeks ago to meet with the Ukrainian investigators who were compiling evidence of war crimes committed there. I saw up close the gaping holes left in residential buildings by Russian shelling. Indiscriminate at best, intentional at worst.
And then President Biden also came out and he spoke, and he basically outright called out President Putin for the aggressiveness and for the lack of character during this war. Here's what he had to say also.
Russia has shamelessly violated the core tenets of the United Nations Charter. No more important than the clear prohibition against countries taking the territory of their neighbor by force.
So again, we've seen the United States now with both President Biden and with the Secretary of State. They've directly called out President Putin for these actions, and we are seeing they are taking the initiative on condemning Russia for this invasion of Ukraine.
A lot happening there. You know, President Putin's forces have been drawn back, as we mentioned a little bit in recent weeks, by Ukraine. What's the latest on the Ukrainian military offensive? Ukraine
has pushed for this massive counteroffensive against Russia. They have taken back more land in the month of September alone than Russia has in the previous 7 months worth of invasion. Now, you can blame this on a whole host of reasons, everything from Ukraine targeting Russian military generals to this war of attrition that they fought. At the end of the day, Ukraine played this out right. They are playing a war of exhaustion. They are using every single, allowing Russia to basically waste Russian military resources, Russian soldiers, to the point where now the shift in the war has changed. And one thing we will have to be on the lookout for is that the war aims at the beginning of the war between Russia and Ukraine are radically different than they are now. And over these next couple weeks as we go into October, will Putin continue to escalate this war despite an increase in Ukraine getting back that territory and ultimately reclaiming that sovereignty?
Well, Dominic, that's something we'll have to take a look at, but thank you so much. Coming up on Talking Points, the New York gubernatorial election is heating up. We'll tell you where poll numbers stand today after the break. Welcome back to Talking Points. Election day here in New York is just around the corner, and the nation is quickly approaching. While the polls for the New York gubernatorial have favored Governor Kathy Hochul, it appears Lee Zeldin has a closer shot to winning than we thought. Talking Points analyst Katie Fongvongsa is here to tell us the movement in the polls. Katie.
Thank you, Tegan. So we're going to take a look at the New York governor's race. We're going to start back in May, where the polls were a little bit closer. Governor Kathy Hochul and Representative Lee Zeldin were closer at their point in time, and we're going to take a look at September 19th, where we see they're a bit closer. Governor Kathy Hochul is at 58.1%, while Representative Lee Zeldin is at about 38.1%. This is about a 14% gap. And then we're going to take a look at the platform targets. So Governor Kathy Hochul is advocating for abortion rights, gun violence, mental health, education policies. She's kind of looking for those education policies that she inducted in her bill after the pandemic, and has allowed for more teachers to be hired, advocating for better education again. And then Representative Lee Zeldin is advocating for education as well, but on the front that it will include some underrepresented students, along with platform pricing and public safety. As for platform pricing, Representative Lee Zeldin is looking at how he can stop the congestion plan for the middle class, as Governor Kathy Hochul is looking to approve a plan that would increase the cost of living in Manhattan, around that area. And then we're also going to look at keeping votes in for Kathy Hochul. She currently has the Hasidic and Orthodox Jewish votes, which she gained last year, but that may change this year. And also, she has the votes in upstate New York, these diverse suburbs. She had the Asian American vote as well, that might change, and also the Spanish speaking as well. And then we're also going to look at Lee Zeldin, where he has the Hasidic and Orthodox voters. He is looking to gather the Asian American voters this year as well, and he is creating a campaign for Russian-speaking and Spanish-speaking voters as well.
Well, Katie, thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk a little bit more about the Jewish population and the importance of that vote. Can you talk about why exactly it is important for either of these candidates to get that vote?
So, as I said before, Governor Kathy Hochul had that vote last year. She has close ties to the community. But this year, Representative Lee Zeldin is looking to gather some of these swing voters, as there was an investigation conducted a few weeks ago back where they saw that the Hasidic population of the education population, where they were not allowed to technically have a basic education due to the way that this area is a little bit more religious, and so they're just going in that way. But keeping this again with the Jewish population, they have about, the Orthodox Jews have about 2 to 3% of the vote, and then the Hasidic population has less than 2%. But this can be a big margin for Zeldin to grab if Kathy Hochul can no longer hold on.
And Katie, there's about 50 days until, this gubernatorial election, and Lee Zeldin is inching closer in the polls to where Kathy Hochul is now. But obviously, like I said, there are 50 days left. Where do we see Lee Zeldin going in that time?
So Lee Zeldin is trying to gather the Russian and Ukrainians where they had voted red in the past, so he can keep these votes in. He's also looking to get the conservative vote of the Hispanics as well. And yeah.
Well, Katie Fongvongsa, thank you so much. And now Chilekasi has more on an election.
Thanks, Tegan. Moving south now, the Texas gubernatorial election is also picking up some steam. A competitive race between incumbent Republican Governor Greg Abbott and Democratic nominee Beto O'Rourke remains close in the polls, just nearly 50 days from election night. Talking Points analyst Ben Schiller is here to break down what we can expect in the closing month of this race. Ben, where do the polls stand right now?
So right now in this poll, we're seeing a lot of trends around the nation that most of the people that are frontrunners in an election, they're going to be the frontrunners throughout the remainder of the election. We're just 52 days away from the election night itself. But take a look at your screen right now. In this race in Texas between the incoming governor, Greg Abbott, and the Democratic nominee, Beto O'Rourke, Greg Abbott has a healthy lead in most of these polls. We're talking at least 4 to 5%. We're seeing a trend, though. In August, Abbott had a closer a lead between O'Rourke and Abbott. It was, if you see in the YouGov poll and the Echelon Insights poll just from last month, Abbott had a 2% lead in the Echelon Insights poll, which is one of the higher rating polls in the country. Then we get to the collegiate polls in September. We're seeing Siena College and the University of Texas at Tyler. And Abbott has a 6% lead in the poll that was released just this past week. And so if things keep on going the way they are, Abbott has a lead down the road.
We've seen big fundraising numbers from Democrats all across the country, but in this Texas race, where do fundraising totals stand?
Right, so in a federal election, in the Congressional and Senate, and even the presidential race, we have more information, but since this is a state election, we don't have that much information that we usually do. We do know that in this past summer, Governor Abbott had $46 million cash on hand. That is from the Texas Tribune itself from just a few months ago. The last time we know what Beto O'Rourke's fundraising numbers were, this was late February. We know that O'Rourke in February had $6.5 million. This is before he won the Democratic nomination. So right now, Abbott definitely just has a sizable fundraising total, and it's definitely, we're seeing it a lot with the TV ads and stuff we're seeing on social media as well between the two candidates.
I'm sure that's going to be one of the big races we cover as we head towards Election Day. Talking Points analyst Ben Schiller, thank you. And coming up on Talking Points, the Congressional Committee on the January 6th investigation resumes public hearings later this week. We'll tell you what you should expect in just 90 seconds.
Did you hear about the pony with a sore throat? He was a little horse. Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why couldn't the Why was the basketball court all wet? Why? Because the players kept dribbling all over it. Where did cats go on vacation? New York.
Welcome back to Talking Points. The Congressional Committee on the January 6th insurrection is holding its first public hearing in months on Wednesday. The investigation is expected to wrap up within the next few weeks. So Chile, this is the 8th hearing to date, and the focus obviously on Donald Trump, the January 6th insurrection, and they're trying to figure out if they're going to give a criminal referral, which in all honesty and actuality is not going to do a lot. It's a recommendation of if they want to go further with the prosecution.
Yeah, and I think we saw that a little bit with 2016 too, with the WikiLeaks emails and whatnot, where we saw the recommendation, or the no recommendation from the FBI, excuse me, but it always is that aspect of whether it's actually going to happen or not. That's information we don't know. But we do know this meeting's supposed to take place Wednesday around 1 o'clock. Like you said, we've had 8 hearings to date, and the last one was kind of focused on President Trump's time in the White House as the Capitol insurrection was happening on January 6th. And I think one of the biggest things, as we always talk about with this, are what are the implications for 2024. The President, I think, has expressed want to run in 2024, but we don't know how this will affect it at all.
Well, Representative Adam Schiff, he said that he wouldn't disclose exactly what the focus of this hearing was going to be, but what he did say is that they would focus on a key element of Trump's plot to overturn the election. So it will be interesting to hear exactly what that key plot point is.
And we'll be watching on Wednesday.
And that's all the time we have for you on this episode of Talking Points. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CitrusTV News, and like us on Facebook. I'm Tegan Brown.
And I'm Chilekasi Adele. We're back next week, same time, same place. Until then, good night.